You won't believe what just happened in Congress. Pam Bondi took the floor, and within seconds, the entire chamber was in total chaos. What she revealed sent shockwaves through Washington and across the internet. Calm, direct, and armed with what she called undeniable proof, Bondi looked straight into the camera and dropped a political bombshell that could change everything we thought we knew about Congressman Glenn F. Ivey. If you're new to this channel, welcome. We break down the biggest political stories, cut through the spin, and bring you the facts others won't. If you care about truth, transparency, and holding power accountable, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss a moment like this, because today's story is something you'll want to follow closely. What started as a typical day on Capitol Hill quickly turned into a firestorm. Lawmakers were moving through a routine session when Pam Bondi, former Florida Attorney General, stood up with a folder in her hand. No theatrics, no hesitation. Her voice was steady, her message explosive. There is a hidden agenda behind Glenn F. Ivey's political rise, she said, and today, the truth comes out. At that moment, the room froze. Bondi had everyone's attention, and she didn't waste it. She claimed to have uncovered a network of secret meetings, undisclosed donations, and private interests steering Ivey's decisions from the shadows. She said this wasn't just politics, it was deception, and it had been happening right under everyone's nose. Holding up documents she said included donor logs, financial statements, and private communication records, Bondi accused Ivey of maintaining close ties to powerful tech firms, data surveillance lobbyists, and private prison interests. According to her, these were not just casual associations. They were strategic alliances, designed to push forward legislation that would benefit corporations while hurting everyday Americans. She laid it all out in plain language. While Ivey publicly speaks about criminal justice reform, Bondi alleged he's been quietly supporting policies that empower the prison industrial complex. While presenting himself as a defender of civil liberties, she said he's been helping expand the power of surveillance programs. And while claiming to fight for the people, she alleged he's actually serving the interests of massive tech firms eager to get their hands on your private data. This isn't about party lines, she said. This is about trust, and Glenn F. Ivey has broken it. The room erupted. Lawmakers were visibly shaken. Some Republicans rose to their feet, shouting for investigations and demanding immediate action. Democrats quickly moved to defend Ivey, accusing Bondi of smearing his name for political gain. But the moment had already gone viral. Live feeds caught every word. Within minutes, hashtags like #IveyExposed and #BondiLeaks were trending across Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. Security struggled to bring the chamber back to order. One member tried to cut Bondi's speech short, but she stood firm, refusing to back down. "Let them yell," she said. "I brought the truth. Now let the American people decide." Cameras captured Ivey sitting in silence, thumbing through his notes, clearly rattled. He didn't respond publicly right away. His office issued a short statement hours later, calling the allegations reckless and completely false, but by then, the story had already taken on a life of its own. Social media lit up. News outlets scrambled to verify the claims. Political commentators across the spectrum began weighing in. Was this a political ambush, or a long overdue exposure of corruption in high office? One thing's for sure, Bondi's accusations have opened the door to questions that won't be easy to ignore. If what she says is true, it doesn't just reflect badly on Glenn Ivey. It raises serious concerns about who's really influencing our lawmakers, what backroom deals are being made, and how far these hidden networks reach. And this is just the beginning. Bondi hinted that more names, more documents, and more evidence are on the way. This may not just be a scandal, it could be a reckoning. The heart of Bondi's accusations came down to one thing: money, where it came from, where it went, and who it ultimately served. According to the documents she held up on the House floor, Glenn F. Ivey wasn't just receiving campaign contributions from traditional donors. Bondi alleged a far more complex network of politically motivated donations that were carefully structured to avoid direct public scrutiny. At the center of it all, Bondi pointed to a series of nonprofits and shell PACs, groups with names that sounded generic and harmless, like Citizens for Progress and National Innovation Network. But according to her, these groups weren't grassroots movements at all. They were heavily funded by big tech firms, defense contractors, and private security companies with direct interest in legislation that Ivey had either sponsored or supported. One of the most striking pieces of evidence Bondi referenced was a timeline of votes made by Ivey that allegedly matched the funding cycle of these outside organizations. She described it like a pattern: the money flowed in, then the votes followed. Some of those votes included bills related to digital surveillance expansion, data storage immunity for corporations, and federal funding increases for privately run detention facilities. All of them were policies Bondi claimed would directly benefit Ivey's undisclosed backers. She didn't stop there. Bondi claimed to have internal memos sent between lobbyists and their clients discussing friendly lawmakers and expected cooperation on key votes. Though she did not read the names aloud in that moment, she made it clear Ivey's name appeared in those messages. One particularly damning piece, according to her, was a message from a major data mining company that read, "Ivey is with us. He understands the long-term strategy." That one sentence, if proven true, could destroy political careers. What makes this even more serious is that several of the entities Bondi named have previously been fined or investigated for aggressive data harvesting, civil rights violations, and illegal surveillance tactics. If these groups were influencing legislation through undisclosed coordination, it wouldn't just be unethical, it could potentially violate federal law. Bondi also cited a dramatic spike in donations to a super PAC loosely affiliated with Ivey. In a single quarter, the PAC received nearly $1.8 million, most of it from obscure LLCs with no listed business activity. According to her, at least 4 of those LLCs traced back to a single office building in Northern Virginia, widely known for housing pop-up corporate entities created to move money without triggering political disclosure laws. In the chamber, members of Congress sat in stunned silence as she explained how these financial trails intersected with real policy outcomes. Bondi insisted this was not a case of sloppy reporting or clerical oversight. It was deliberate, controlled, and executed by people who believed they were untouchable. She asked a simple but powerful question: if Glenn Ivey was making decisions in the best interest of the public, why hide where the money is coming from? Why the silence, the shell companies, the backroom briefings? What exactly are they afraid we'll see? The weight of that question hung in the air. Outside the chamber, journalists, watchdog groups, and even former campaign finance attorneys began digging into the claims. Several early fact checks confirmed that donations from tech-tied PACs to committees supporting Ivey had in fact spiked following key votes. The coincidence alone was enough to reignite the debate over how much influence corporate lobbying has over so-called independent representatives. Bondi's statements may have been direct and fierce, but the data she presented painted an even clearer picture, one of a system that rewards silence, punishes transparency, and buries the truth beneath layers of red tape. Glenn Ivey, for his part, has strongly denied all allegations, calling them reckless and politically motivated. He insists all campaign contributions were properly reported and legal. But as more people start asking hard questions, the pressure is mounting. Not just on Ivey, but on anyone who stood by while this funding pattern quietly shaped American law. Bondi made no apologies for the firestorm she lit. In fact, she welcomed it. Because in her words, when you follow the money, you always find the motive. And sometimes, you find something far worse than corruption, you find betrayal. This isn't just a story about campaign finance. It's a story about what happens when the walls built to protect democracy are used to hide the very forces that threaten it. And now that those walls are cracking, there's no telling what will be exposed next. The reaction was immediate and it was chaos. As Pam Bondi finished speaking, you could feel the tension inside the chamber boil over. For a moment, there was silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Then, as if on cue, it all erupted. Lawmakers stood up, some in support, others in outrage. Voices clashed. Shouts echoed across the floor. People were pointing, pacing, calling for order, waving papers in the air. It didn't feel like Congress. It felt like the edge of something unraveling. What Bondi had just delivered wasn't a speech. It was a full-blown political detonation, and now everyone was scrambling to respond, some to defend themselves, others to seize the momentum. On the Republican side, members immediately called for an ethics investigation into Congressman Glenn Ivey. Several demanded that the documents Bondi had referenced be entered into the official record. One lawmaker even introduced a motion to subpoena Ivey's communications with the groups Bondi had named live, right there on the floor. Democrats responded just as forcefully, accusing Bondi of political grandstanding. One senior member of Ivey's own party said the accusations were baseless, reckless, and a dangerous attack on the credibility of this institution. Some walked out in protest. Others confronted Bondi directly, questioning her sources and suggesting she was being used to deliver a smear campaign orchestrated behind the scenes. But Bondi didn't flinch. She stood firm, eyes locked forward, letting the storm swirl around her. There was no backtracking, no softening of her claims. She had brought the receipts, and she was ready to let them speak louder than any rebuttal. In the minutes that followed, the House chamber descended into the kind of disorder rarely seen on live television. The Speaker tried to bring things back to order, slamming the gavel repeatedly, calling for calm. Staffers huddled together, whispering urgently. Aides moved quickly between rows, delivering hastily printed statements and talking points. Phones lit up. News alerts started going out in waves. Outside the chamber, the ripple effects spread fast. Reporters sprinted down hallways, shoving microphones into lawmakers' faces as they exited. Cable news networks cut away from regular programming to go live. Social media exploded with clips of Bondi's speech. Her name was trending in less than 15 minutes. Glenn Ivey's name, too, but for all the wrong reasons. On Twitter, a video of Bondi slamming the folder onto the podium was viewed over 4 million times within the first hour. On TikTok, reaction videos were pouring in. Angry, shocked, some even emotional. It wasn't just political analysts reacting. It was students, veterans, small business owners, everyday citizens who felt like they had just seen something real happen in a place that usually feels far from reality. The conversation wasn't just about whether Bondi was right. It was about why no one had said anything sooner. People wanted to know how deep it went. If one congressman could be so deeply entangled in something this serious, how many others were quietly following the same path? Inside the Capitol, Glenn Ivey remained mostly silent. He was seen leaving the chamber quickly, surrounded by staff, his face unreadable. Later that day, he released a carefully worded statement saying that Bondi's remarks were false and defamatory, accusing her of turning the House into a theater of political extremism. But the damage had been done. The questions were out. The attention was locked in. Even some of Ivey's usual allies in Congress were now being cautious. One anonymous source from within his own caucus told a reporter, "We need to see the documents. This isn't something we can just dismiss." That single sentence sent shockwaves through back channels on Capitol Hill. By nightfall, ethics watchdogs had already begun filing formal requests for a full investigation. Political accountability groups were calling for transparency. Some even demanded Ivey temporarily step down from committee assignments until the situation was resolved. The pressure was mounting fast, and there was no indication it would ease anytime soon. The next morning, Bondi's words were plastered across front pages, websites, and nightly news tickers. Not just what she said, but how she said it. The composure. The confidence. The quiet fury in her delivery. She hadn't just exposed something. She had redefined the stakes. What took place inside the chamber was more than partisan theater. It was the collision of two realities, one that had carefully maintained its image of control, and another that was suddenly demanding answers. And in that moment, with cameras rolling, the American people weren't just watching. They were waking up. For most people watching from home, it might be easy to see what happened in Congress as just more political drama. Another shouting match. Another controversy. But what Pam Bondi revealed, and the storm that followed, isn't just about one politician or one chamber. It's about something much bigger. Something that could affect nearly every American in ways that aren't visible until it's too late. Because the heart of her accusation wasn't just that Glenn Ivey took money. it was about what that money bought. It's about legislation passed with barely any debate that expanded digital surveillance powers without public understanding. It's about contracts quietly awarded to private companies to store massive amounts of personal data under the name of security. It's about criminal justice reforms that look good on paper but, according to Bondi, are actually structured to benefit private prisons and data brokers who profit from the system never really changing. The hidden agenda she described wasn't something cooked up overnight. It was slow, calculated, hidden behind legal loopholes, vague amendments, and technical jargon buried deep in 1,000-page bills. Bondi's warning was clear: while the public was distracted, the machinery of influence was hard at work. She explained how, with just a few key votes, someone like Ivey could help pass legislation that lets tech companies collect user data in bulk, with little oversight. Or back policies that allow prisons to receive funding per head, creating incentives to keep cells filled instead of empty. Or support bills that reduce transparency in federal contracts, making it harder to trace where taxpayer money really goes. Most people don't read congressional voting records. Most people don't have the time to comb through financial disclosures or track the movement of money through layered organizations. But Bondi had done that work, or had someone do it for her. And what she found pointed to one unavoidable truth: decisions were being made that didn't serve the people. They served someone else. And that's the part that hit hardest. Not just the corruption itself, but the sense of betrayal. People vote because they trust. They pay taxes, follow the law, and expect that their representatives, regardless of party, are working for their communities. When that trust is broken, it's not just a political failure. It's a wound that cuts through the core of the country's democracy. Bondi's revelations forced viewers to ask difficult questions. Who's really writing our laws? Who benefits when privacy is stripped away in the name of efficiency? When crime is politicized, who profits? When voter attention drifts, who moves in to shape policy without resistance? These aren't just abstract concerns. They touch on daily life in ways that most people don't see. The moment you agree to new app permissions. The moment a family member is caught in the justice system. The moment your online data is sold to someone you've never heard of, only to see it used against you in a job application, an insurance quote, or a bank decision. This isn't fearmongering. It's a reality made possible by silence. By the kind of backroom agreements Bondi says have become normalized in Washington. And if what she exposed about Glenn F. Ivey is even partly true, it means that silence was bought and sold. It also means accountability won't come from inside those walls. Not unless the public demands it. Because what was on display in that chamber wasn't just a clash of politics. It was a mirror held up to the system itself. And what it reflected was deeply uncomfortable: a system where money moves quietly, influence operates in shadows, and public interest is often just a convenient slogan. The reaction from ordinary citizens was louder than any press conference. People from across the political spectrum, left, right, and center, started speaking out. Not everyone agreed with Bondi's politics, but many agreed with her message: something is broken. And maybe the only way to fix it is to face it head-on, no matter how uncomfortable it gets. What she exposed was more than a hidden agenda. It was the price of looking away. And now that people are paying attention, the question isn't whether there's a problem. The question is what anyone is going to do about it. The fallout didn't take days or weeks. It started the moment Pam Bondi left the floor. The buzz that began in the chamber spread like wildfire. News anchors tried to keep up. Political analysts scrambled for context. Lobbyists went quiet. Glenn F. Ivey's team went on full defense mode, holding emergency meetings, fielding media requests, and issuing a tightly worded press release calling Bondi's accusations desperate and malicious. But the momentum was already too strong to stop. For the first time in years, people weren't just watching politics unfold, they were feeling it. Viewers who had long given up on Washington were suddenly locked in, re-watching clips, forwarding interviews, breaking down every sentence in Bondi's statement like investigators. This wasn't about loyalty to a party. It wasn't about left versus right. It was about one question that cut through everything else. Are the people in power really working for us? Bondi's accusations lit a fire under that question. Because it wasn't just about illegal donations or undisclosed meetings. It was about betrayal. A slow, methodical betrayal that doesn't make headlines until someone shines a light directly on it. Over the following days, watchdog groups began digging deeper. One of them found a 2019 grant awarded to a private data firm that had publicly endorsed legislation Ivey co-sponsored. The firm's founder had, according to federal records, donated through a proxy PAC connected to Ivey's district. Legal? Maybe. Ethical? Questionable. Tied to influence? The dots were starting to connect. Another journalist uncovered that two of the nonprofits Bondi mentioned had quietly closed their doors just months after major legislation passed, legislation that directly benefited their reported parent companies. Their websites were deleted. Their offices emptied. Their filings erased in the bureaucracy of overlapping state registries. Gone. Just like that. None of this was definitive proof of wrongdoing. But the smell of something rotten was undeniable. And yet, even amid the pressure, Glenn F. Ivey didn't back down. He continued to appear at events, insisting his hands were clean. He called the entire controversy a coordinated smear attempt, and warned against letting manufactured outrage replace facts. But the public wasn't satisfied with blanket denials anymore. They wanted names. They wanted numbers. They wanted transparency, not rhetoric. As the days turned into weeks, the impact was impossible to ignore. Poll numbers shifted. Petitions circulated. Independent journalists launched crowd-funded investigations into Ivey's legislative record. Civil liberties organizations began calling for campaign finance reform in response to the scandal. One bill proposed a new law requiring full real-time donor disclosure for PACs involved in legislative lobbying, already being referred to as the Bondi Rule in some circles. This wasn't just a hit on one politician. It was a crack in the wall, a sudden, blinding flash of light in a space that had been dark for too long. And maybe that's the legacy of what Pam Bondi did that day. Maybe it wasn't just about exposing Ivey's alleged connections. Maybe it was about reminding people that silence isn't safety. That when no one speaks out, systems rot from the inside. And that sometimes, it only takes one voice loud, clear, unshaken, to change the entire conversation. What happens next, no one can say for sure. Investigations take time. People forget quickly. The political machine doesn't slow down for scandal. But one thing has already changed: people are paying attention. Not just to the headlines, but to the hidden details beneath them. To where the money flows. To who benefits. To the quiet votes that shape the lives of millions. And once that awareness is lit, it's hard to put out. Pam Bondi didn't just challenge Glenn F. Ivey. She challenged everyone to look harder, ask more questions, and stop accepting vague promises as accountability. Whether you believe every detail she revealed or not, her message was simple: don't just listen to what they say. Watch what they do. And for the first time in a long time, people are watching. Thanks for watching. If this story made you think, leave a comment, like the video, and hit that subscribe button. We'll keep following the facts, no matter where they lead.